all you freedom-loving people. While missiles continue to strike Iran and Israel, President Trump joins the world leaders at the G7 in Canada, and after the No Kings protest, President Trump is calling for more deportations from sanctuary cities. Okay, let's get into it. Two Minnesota state legislators and their families were shot at their homes on Saturday. The first to be attacked was Senator John Hoffman and his family. Law enforcement responded to a report at 2 a.m. Saturday morning that State Senator Hoffman and his wife had been shot. Hoffman and his wife Yvette were both shot multiple times at their home. Police arrived at their residence and administered first aid before transporting both to the hospital. They both were wounded and underwent surgery Saturday morning. At that time, they were in a more optimistic situation. Hoffman's family was told that a bullet almost grazed the senator's heart and that his wife was not shot through any organs. Yvette's nephew said that their daughter was at home at the time, but Yvette jumped on her daughter to protect her during the shooting. While working on the case of Senator Hoffman, a sheriff was acutely aware of the situation. Melissa Hortman, who was also a member of Congress, might also be in danger. He made an impromptu decision to have his patrol officers stop by and check it out. The two families live a few miles away from each other in Champlain and Brooklyn Park, just north of Minneapolis. When the two precinct officers arrived at Hortman's house, they saw a police car parked in the driveway of Hortman's home with its overhead lights flashing. And there was a person at the door dressed as a police officer wearing a vest and badge with a taser and other equipment coming out of Hortman's house. The police came forward to question him, but the suspect fired at the officers and gunfire was exchanged. Then the suspect was able to escape and flee on foot. As police approached the door of the house, they found a shot man on the ground inside. They dragged him out to render aid, but the man was not revived. Because of the fear that the murderer was still inside the house, the police could not enter the house hastily. Instead, after encircling the house, they deployed a large number of reinforcements and drones. The police eventually found another woman inside the house. She was Democratic State Representative Melissa Hortman. She was formerly the Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives. The man who died near the front door was her husband, Mark. The killer fled through the back of the house. He was dressed up as a police officer using a fake badge, fake uniform, and fake equipment. The car parked in front of the door that looked like a police car was also fake. So this was not ordinary revenge or a random offense, but a politically motivated assassination. The suspect was wearing a realistic latex mask at the time of the shooting, and he also had what is suspected to be a list of other targets with the names of dozens of Minnesota politicians. Hortman was the only Democrat representative to vote in favor of cutting health care for adult illegal immigrants in Minnesota. Here is the video of her speech before the shooting.
I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal that wouldn't include that provision.
DFL Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman emotional following the House's adjournment from a special session Monday. Hortman was the lone DFL lawmaker to cast a vote to cut Minnesota Care access for undocumented immigrants. It's a move she made with a heavy heart.
I did what leaders do. I stepped up and I got the job done for the people of Minnesota.
It's hard to confirm that the list that was found on the suspect was a list of potential targets or something else, but the list included Governor Tim Walz, U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, U.S. Senator Tina Smith, and State Attorney General Keith Ellison. It also included the names of abortion providers and pro-choice activists, so security resources have been dispatched to protect those people who were named on the list. There were also no King's flyers found in the suspect's vehicle, which would seem to contradict the alleged target list. Authorities have identified the suspect as Vance Luther Bolter, who is 57. State records show that Bolter had been appointed to Governor Tim Walz's State Workforce Development Board in 2019 alongside Hoffman, but it's unclear if they knew each other or how well they knew each other. Bolter has also worked as a director of a security company. He also had security experience in Africa and in the Middle East. The FBI offered a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Vance Bolter. With the manhunt ongoing, police warned residents to call 911 if an officer came to their door. The 911 call could confirm that the officer was supposed to be there. The Hennepin County Sheriff's Office said, "Police are asking that no one open their door to a lone police officer. Licensed officers are working in pairs." The good news is that Bolter was arrested on Sunday night in the woods near Green Isle, Minnesota. Authorities on Sunday found Bolter's vehicle abandoned in Sibley County, Minnesota, and a separate vehicle that was designed to look like a police cruiser was also found at Bolter's residence. President Trump's long-awaited military parade took to the streets of downtown Washington on Saturday. The march, which coincided with President Trump's 79th birthday, featured tanks, armored personnel carriers, and artillery that came rumbling down Constitutional Avenue. In addition to traditional Army tanks and armored vehicles, it also displayed new equipment, such as various types of drones, mechanical dogs, and unmanned combat vehicles, such as the Ripsaw M5. The U.S. Army sent nearly 7,000 soldiers and 150 military vehicles to Washington this time. This included 25 M1 Abrams tanks, 28 Stryker armored vehicles, 4 Paladin self-propelled guns, and a variety of howitzers, including the M777 and the M119. Notably, the Ripsaw M5 unmanned combat vehicle was also present along with mechanical dogs and more to show what the future of American military equipment will look like. In addition to the main combat vehicles, the event also featured the classic M4 Sherman combat vehicle, which paid tribute to the glory of the U.S. Army in World War II. The vehicle was officially put in combat in 1942, and it was the main armored vehicle of the U.S. Army and Marine Corps. It was also used by the United Kingdom and other allied countries to support the Allied forces in their offensive operation in Europe and the Pacific Theater. This display of military power was a rare sight in the United States. The last major parade was in 1991 to celebrate the expulsion of Iraqi President Hussein's forces from Kuwait in the Persian Gulf War. However, the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army was marred by No King's Day protests in various states that were staged to try and highlight a deep political division in the United States. An investigation found that Chinese-American political activists were involved in organizing No King's protests in California. They have extensive ties with the Chinese Communist Party's intelligence network. The Daily Caller News Foundation reported that according to bulletins and flyers, the California-based Political Action Committee called the Asian American Pacific Islander Advancement Coalition, the AAPA, is promoting these national protests. Elaine Peng, the president of the AAPA, is also an executive of the United Chinese Americans, the UCA. This is a nonprofit organization that is headquartered in Washington, D.C., where she serves as director of training. Reports from the Chinese government and official media, however, indicate that many of the UCA executives have served in the past as members of the CCP government and or Beijing's intelligence services. Michael Lucci, the founder and CEO of State Armor, which is a nonprofit organization that is focused on fighting the CCP, told the Daily Caller News Foundation that he believes the UCA is linked to the CCP's vast network of supporters around the world. The UCA's position has long been aligned with that of Beijing and that of the UCA's affiliates, the UCA Action and the UCA PAC. They have repeatedly protested U.S. national security initiatives, claiming that these policies incite racial discrimination. For example, the UCA released an open letter in December of 2020 calling for the removal of a provision in the Senate's highly skilled Immigration Fairness Act. They called it bigoted and xenophobic. The provision prevents any foreigner with ties to China or the Chinese Communist military from becoming a permanent resident or citizen. Recently, the UCA issued a brief on June 1st condemning the U.S. State Department's decision in May of 2025 to revoke the visas of Chinese students with ties to the Chinese Communist Party or who are studying in key territories. And the UCA has organized several other demonstrations against U.S. national security programs, including a January of 2022 protest against the Department of Justice's initiative to combat CCP espionage. On Sunday, President Trump directed immigration and custom enforcement officers to expand their efforts to detain and deport illegal migrants from the country. In a True Social post, President Trump urged ICE officers to use all its resources to deliver what he described as the single largest mass deportation program in history. This program will particularly take place in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, where many illegal migrants are concentrated. President Trump noted that ICE officers have faced violence and threats from opponents of the operation, but he emphasized that nothing will deter this administration from fulfilling its mandate. President Trump stated, "Our federal government will continue to be focused on the remigration of aliens to the places from where they came and preventing the admission of anyone who undermines the domestic tranquility of the United States. However, the deportations will have a few exceptions. This is because farmers, hoteliers, and leisure business operators say that the administration's immigration policy is taking very good long-time workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace." In response, President Trump suggested that his administration would deal with the issue of illegal migrants who work in agriculture, hospitality, and other industries. So for now, the focus will be on deporting the criminal element. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins explained that the president understands that we can't feed our nation or the world without that labor force, and he's listening to the farmers on that. The Trump administration is also considering to significantly expand its travel restrictions that already banned the entry of citizens from 12 countries. The new potential ban might prevent citizens of 36 additional countries from entering the United States. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent out an internal memo that highlighted a dozen concerns about the new countries in question. Rubio said in the memo, the department has identified 36 countries of concern that might be recommended for full or partial suspension of entry if they do not meet established benchmarks and requirements within 60 days. The State Department raised concerns about the lack of a competent or cooperative government by some of the countries mentioned to produce reliable identity documents. Another concern was questionable security of that country's passport. Based on the memo, some countries were not cooperative in facilitating the removal of their nationals from the United States who were ordered to be removed, and some countries were overstaying the U.S. visas that their citizens were granted. Other reasons for concern were the nationals of the country that were involved in acts of terrorism in the United States or anti-Semitic and anti-American activity. The memo was sent out while thousands of protesters marched and rallied in cities from New York to Los Angeles on Saturday. In Los Angeles, police issued dispersal orders after protesters turned violent with rocks and bricks reportedly thrown at law enforcement officers. The Department of Homeland Security stated that rioters in Portland, Oregon, used fireworks, hurled smoke grenades, and threw rocks at law enforcement before storming an ICE facility. 4 officers were injured in the protest. In response, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem warned rioters that ICE would not stop or delay immigration enforcement despite the paid protests. Iran and Israel continue to trade fire as the conflict enters day 4. Both sides fired new waves of missiles over the weekend despite international pleas for de-escalation. And in one of the Iranian attacks on Israel today in the early hours, there was one missile that struck near the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. But the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, clarified on X, saying there was no injuries to U.S. personnel at U.S. Embassy branch. The minor damage to property were from the shock waves, that is, concussions from the nearby blast, not human concussions. But the U.S. Embassy will remain officially closed due to the ongoing security concerns. So far, the Israeli military has said that its fighter jets struck multiple Iranian ballistic missile launchers, air defense systems, radar installations, command centers, surface-to-surface missile launchers, and a key fuel depot, while another oil refinery in the capital, Tehran, was in flames. In addition, in line with their plan, Israel killed more nuclear scientists, high-ranking officials, and commanders. So many people wonder what is the ultimate goal of Israel. Israeli officials have said that the current goal of the campaign is not a change in the Iranian regime, but the dismantling of Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes that regime change could certainly be the result because the Iran regime is very weak. He noted that his campaign is giving its people a chance to topple the Islamic Republic. In an interview, Netanyahu was also asked about reports that President Trump rejected his plan to assassinate the supreme leader over concerns that it would escalate the conflict. But Netanyahu said it's not going to escalate the conflict, it's going to end the conflict. Sources within Iran told Iran International that the supreme leader was moved to an underground bunker in the hours after Israel began its attacks. He is believed to be holed up with his family, including his son, who has been pegged as his potential successor. It seems that the Islamic regime is doing anything it can to keep its power. It is doing so by launching several rounds of missiles and drone attacks at different locations in Israel, targeting buildings while killing and injuring civilians. And in response, Israel bombed Iran's state broadcaster today. But the IDF said that it warned civilians, including via phone calls and publishing a video ahead of the strike to minimize any harm to them. The TV was live on air during the attack. The blast occurred as the presenter was lambasting Israel before she was seen leaving the broadcast. So as the conflict heats up, Iran officially called on President Trump to push Israel to engage in a ceasefire to end the conflict. Amid calls to end the conflict, a flight that departed from Zhengzhou, China, may have diverted from its original destination. It was headed towards Luxembourg, but appears to have headed to Iran instead, prompting speculation of China's continued support of Iran. Some analysts have warned of the China-Iran-Russia axis challenging U.S. interests. Part of this alignment has to do with China's economic dependence on Iranian oil. But if China is still helping Iran, is an immediate end to the conflict still possible? President Trump believes that there is a chance. He has said that the Iranian leaders want to talk. President Trump is currently at the Group of 7 summit in Canada with world leaders. The world leaders are trying to find a way to calm the escalating conflict, while President Trump still believes that Iran needs to curb its nuclear program. President Trump said Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens, but sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
And when asked what it would take for the U.S. to get involved in the conflict militarily, President Trump said, I don't want to talk about that. President Trump also said that it was a mistake to remove Russia from the summit's membership in 2014, and doing that has destabilized the world. Presidents Trump and Putin spoke for nearly an hour on Saturday for Putin to congratulate President Trump on his birthday and Flag Day. It was the 5th time the two of them spoke since President Trump's second term. President Trump stated in his post on Truth Social that Putin very nicely wished him a happy 79th birthday. Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov told the media that the two leaders exchanged views mainly on the dangerous escalation of the situation in the Middle East. Putin condemned Israel's military action against Iran, and he expressed serious concern about a possible escalation of the conflict. He said that this would have unpredictable consequences for the entire Middle East situation. Ushakov said that during the call, President Putin briefed President Trump on recent conversations with Iranian and Israeli leaders, and he reiterated Russia's offer to seek a mutually acceptable solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. President Trump said that the events in the Middle East were very troubling, but he acknowledged that Israel's attacks on Iranian targets were effective. President Trump reiterated in the Post Putin's shared belief. He wrote, "He feels as I do this war in Israel-Iran should end, to which I explained his war should also end." Both leaders said that they would not rule out returning to talks on Iran's nuclear program. President Putin also informed President Trump about the implementation of the Istanbul agreements that were reached in Turkey on June 2nd. Russia is ready to continue negotiations with the Ukrainian side after June 22nd and after a new round of prisoner exchanges between the two sides. President Trump said he is doing the planned prisoner swaps. Large numbers of prisoners are being exchanged immediately from both sides. President Trump mentioned that much less time was spent talking about Russia-Ukraine during this phone conversation, but Zelensky is now very worried. He posted on X complaining that right now the tone of U.S.-Russia dialogue feels too warm. He also worried that after Israel launched a massive attack on Iran, Washington might sacrifice Ukrainian interests and redeploy resources in order to bolster the defenses of its close ally, Israel. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave us a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.